She almost called in sick. If she had, someone would have stayed lost forever. And the worst part, she had no idea that morning was the turning point. That's the detail she confessed later, like it was the kind of secret that could change the meaning of everything. How the alarm went off at 5:15, and she lay there in the grey, dark of her apartment, staring at the ceiling fan that wobbled just slightly on setting 2, running a mental checklist of every ache, every hour of sleep she hadn't gotten, every reason the hospital would still spin on its axis without her for one day. She almost called in sick. She didn't. And that decision, made in a room that smelled faintly of detergent and last, Knight's hair oil, became the hinge her life turned on. Her name is Patience Okafor. She's 26, second-year nurse at Hargrove Medical Centre, long-term care wing, 4th floor. The quiet floor. The floor some nurses avoid because the work is slow and heavy, and you can do everything right and still not get a clean win by the end of your shift. Patience chose nursing the way. Some people choose a promise they don't fully understand yet. When she was 14, her mother had been in the hospital for a week with complications from a respiratory infection that turned mean. Patience remembers the fear like it was a taste in her mouth, metallic, constant. She remembers the plastic chair beside the bed and the way her mother's breathing sounded wrong at night. And she remembers a nurse, a woman with tired eyes and soft hands who came in at 2 a.m., checked the monitors, adjusted the blanket, and then, like it mattered, took Patience's mother's hand and held it for a long moment. Not rushed, not performative, just there. Patience watched that and thought without words. That is what hands are for. She carried that thought into adulthood like a map. She became good at the job in the way that doesn't make headlines, methodical, observant, quietly relentless, the kind of nurse whose charts are clean and whose patients look calmer 5 minutes after she steps in the room. Even if nothing dramatic changed, she knocks before she enters. Most people don't, not always. Some knock when families are present, as a courtesy for the living. Patience knocks because she believes the room belongs to the patient whether anyone's watching or not. She believes boundaries should not depend on an audience. On the 4th floor, that belief makes her unusual. Room 412 had been occupied for 11 weeks when Patience was assigned to it. The patient's name was Edmund Hardcastle, 61, founder and former CEO of Hardcastle Logistics, the kind of company built from a single truck and stubbornness into something big enough to have executives and lawyers and quarterly reports. He had been found unresponsive in his home, officed by his housekeeper on a Thursday morning in August. Neurological event, significant. The doctors used careful words. They always do when they don't know which direction the story is going to go. He had no wife, divorced 12 years, one adult daughter, Serena, who lived in London and flew in for the first 2 weeks, then went back with the exhausted grief of someone told to wait, without being given a way to do it. There was a business partner who visited twice and stopped coming, a lawyer who brought a folder and spoke quietly in the hall, a financial advisor who looked at machines like they were personal insults, and then slowly there was less. Less talking at the door, less hovering, less flowers. In long-term care, the world forgets you in stages. It's not cruelty as much as it is physics. People run out of hope the way they run out of money, gradually, and then all at once. Patience read Edmund Hardcastle's chart thoroughly before she walked in. Vitals history, medications, notes from speech therapy that never started, notes from PT that didn't apply yet, notes from doctors that danced around certainty. She stood at the door, took one breath, then knocked. 2 soft knocks. No response, of course. Still, she waited half a second like she meant it. Then she entered. Room 412 was dim. Machines kept their rhythm. The air smelled like disinfectant and something faintly medicinal that never fully leaves. Hospital rooms, no matter how often you clean them. Edmund Hardcastle lay in the bed with the stillness of someone who has been still for a long time. His hair had grown out. His face looked thinner than the old photos in his file. Patience moved closer, checked his lines, checked his skin, checked his positioning. Did the work with the quiet focus of someone who respects the body as a place worth tending. Then she spoke. "Good morning, Mr. Hardcastle." Her voice didn't rise or soften dramatically. She spoke the way she spoke to anyone whose dignity she was responsible for. "My name is Patience. I'll be your nurse going forward. I know Trevor's been taking care of you, and he's good. But you're stuck with me now, so I hope that's acceptable." Machines continued breathing for him. She began his morning care. Warm water, gentle soap, the slow wiping that most people rush because they're tired. and because nobody is talking back, and Patience doesn't rush because she refuses to let silence make someone disposable. While she worked, she talked. Not medical things. Not updates he couldn't answer. Not the sterile language that turns people into tasks. She talked like he was still a person in the room. She talked about the morning drive in, about how the sky looked just before sunrise. Layers of colour she couldn't name properly but would try anyway. She talked about the coffee she drank in the parking lot from a dented thermos, waiting for the caffeine to do its job. She talked about a book she was reading, a story about a woman crossing a continent alone. She talked like she wasn't performing. It was her practice. She did it with all her patience, conscious or not. But with Edmund Hardcastle, the quiet in the room felt different. She couldn't have explained it in a staff meeting. There was nothing measurable in it, just a feeling, like the silence had weight, like someone was behind it. The next morning she came back, and the next. By the end of the first week, she knew his rhythms, the particular angle his head preferred, the exact way his hand curled when his muscles relaxed, the small cues the machines gave when something was off before the numbers changed. And she started noticing the room. There were photographs on the windowsill. Someone, Serena most likely, had brought them in, a younger Edmund on a fishing boat, laughing at something outside the frame, the sunlight making his eyes crease at the corners. Edmund with a small girl on his shoulders, both squinting into the sun. Serena, as a child, holding on like the world was safe because her father was strong. Patience straightened those photos every morning, not because it changed the medicine, because it changed the room. One morning she paused on the fishing photo and said, quietly, "You look like someone who laughs easily, the surprised by joy kind." Then she did something she didn't do with everyone, not exactly like this. She asked him to come back, not softly, not like a prayer, like an instruction she knew she had no authority to give and gave anyway. "I'm going to need you to come back," she said, her hand steady as she adjusted a line. "I know that's not how this works, and I know I can't bargain with your brain, but I'm asking anyway." She said it the next morning too, and the next. It became part of the routine, as fixed as checking his skin and turning him carefully to prevent sores. "Come back, come back, come back." Patience didn't tell anyone she did this. She didn't want it labelled unprofessional. She didn't want it turned into a debate about boundaries. In her mind, it wasn't about boundaries. It was about dignity, about speaking to a person like they could hear you because it felt wrong to treat them like they couldn't. 3 weeks into her assignment, to room 412, on a Thursday morning in early November, Patience entered like she always did. Knock, wait, enter. She warmed the water, folded the towels, began his care. She was mid-story. She was talking about a phone call with her mother the night before, one of those calls where you end up laughing because your family will argue about anything, even vegetables. Her mother's neighbour had apparently moved a fence line by 6 inches, and now there was an ongoing feud involving a specific variety of squash, like it was national policy. Patience was mid-sentence when it happened. Edmund Hardcastle opened his eyes. Not dramatically, no gasp, no sudden sit-up like in movies, just a slow surfacing. His eyelids fluttered, opened to narrow slits, then wider, his head turned slightly. And he looked at her. Patience went still in a way that felt like her bones decided it for her. Later, she would struggle to describe what she felt because it was too big for the words available. Shock, yes. Immediate professional alertness. But underneath that, something else. Something almost sacred, like witnessing a return. "Mr. Hardcastle," she said, and her voice came out steadier than her chest felt. "You're at Hargrove Medical Center. My name is Patience. You're safe." His lips moved. She leaned closer. "The squash," he said. The voice was rough, barely there, worn from disuse. But it was unmistakably a voice. Patience stared at him. Then she laughed. She couldn't help it. A small, startled laugh that burst out of her like relief. She covered her mouth immediately, embarrassed at her own humanity. "The squash," she said, breathless. "Yes, I'll tell you how it ends." She pressed the call button. The room filled fast. Doctors, nurses, controlled urgency. People doing the things that needed doing. Assessments, vitals, orders, confirmation that yes, he was awake. Yes, he was tracking. Yes, this was real. Patience stepped back, hands clasped at her waist, watching from the doorway. He was back. He was actually back. Serena was on a plane within hours. She arrived with eyes that looked like she hadn't blinked since August. She came into the room like she was afraid to breathe too hard and break the moment. Edmund saw her. The first sound he made that wasn't a word was a small, broken exhale that could have been a laugh or a sob. Serena took his hand and said, "Hi, Dad," like she'd been practicing the sentence for 11 weeks. Patience stayed assigned through the initial transition, because the floor was busy and her supervisor knew she had the rapport, if you could call it that, with room 412. The days that followed were not magical. They were work, the careful, incremental work of return. He failed small tests and then passed others. Speech came back in fragments. Strength returned in frustrating inches. The man who once ran a company now had to concentrate to lift a cup. And still, he was himself. Dry humor, like a blade kept in a sheath. Observant eyes that gathered information before speaking. On the third day after he woke, they were alone during morning care. Patience adjusted his blanket, checked his IV, looked at his face for cues. Edmund said, "You talk to me." The whole time, Patience kept her hands steady. "I talk to all my patients." "About squash disputes?" "The content varies," she said. A faint curve touched his mouth, not a smile yet. The memory of one. He stared at the window, as if the light there was evidence he'd once doubted. "I heard you," he said. Patience froze just slightly. "Not always," he continued. "Not continuously. But sometimes, like hearing something through water." He looked at her. "I heard you telling me to come back." Patience swallowed. She kept her expression professional, because that's the uniform she wears over her heart. "Did it work?" she asked. "I'm here," he said, simply, as if that settled every argument in the world. 2 weeks after waking, Edmund transferred to a rehab facility. Serena hugged Patience at the elevator, gripping her like she didn't want to let go of anyone connected to his return. "He talks about you," Serena said. "Since the first day he could. He's a good patient," Patience replied automatically. Serena pulled back, eyes sharp. "That's not what I mean, and I think you know it." Patience did know it, and she hated knowing it because it made things complicated. She went back to work, took new rooms, kept knocking, kept talking to people who couldn't answer. She told herself that was the end. It wasn't. 6 weeks later, at the end of a shift, the unit clerk handed Patience an envelope addressed to her. Real paper, real stamp, handwriting that wavered slightly, as if the hand had to remember its old discipline. Patience took it to her car and sat there with the engine off, reading by the yellow light of the parking lot. It was 3 pages. Edmund wrote about waking up, about how her voice had been the thread he followed back, about hearing her describe sunrise colours and thinking, "I want to see that," about the squash story making him want to laugh in a body. That wasn't cooperating yet. He wrote, "I have spent 40 years building systems and structures. I have been good at that and less good at everything else. I would like to ask if you would be willing to have a conversation with me now that I am capable of participating in one. I understand if this crosses whatever line you consider appropriate. I am aware this is an unusual introduction, but I believe you are someone worth knowing in the conventional sense. Meaning while both parties are fully conscious, and I don't want to let the chance pass without asking." Patience read it twice, then she stared at the 3rd page, like it might offer instructions. She went home and called her mother. Her mother listened without interrupting, which Patience knew meant her mother was taking it seriously. When Patience finished, her mother said, "A man who knows what he wants and asks clearly. Do you know how rare that is?" "He's older than me," Patience said. "He's alive when he might not have been," her mother replied. "That changes the accounting. That's not conventional wisdom." Her mother made a small sound. "Conventional wisdom is for people who aren't paying attention." Patience laughed despite herself. Then she thought about the photographs on the windowsill. The fishing photo. The surprised by joy laugh. She wrote back. They met for dinner 3 months after his transfer. A quiet restaurant. Early seating. The kind of place where nobody would stare if he walked slowly. Edmund arrived with a cane he used more than he wanted to admit. Thinner than the photographs, but unmistakably himself. He watched the room before he sat. He watched her too. Not like a man trying to charm a young woman, but like a man gathering the truth. They talked. Not about miracles, not about fate, about real things. He asked questions and listened. Like listening was a privilege he'd been denied for 11 weeks. At one point he asked, "Do you always talk to them?" "Your unconscious patients." "Always." "Do you believe they hear you?" Patience looked him in the eye. "I believe it's wrong to assume they don't." He nodded slowly. "That's a precise ethical position. It's the only one that makes sense to me." He set his fork down, as if he'd reached the part he'd rehearsed. "I'm going to tell you something," he said. "And it might sound like more than it is. So I want you to know I'm aware of it, and I've thought about it carefully. Patience didn't move. She waited. I've had a full life, Edmund said. By most measures. And I built significant things. I travelled. I had relationships. Some good, some less so. I experienced most of what a person can experience. He paused, breath controlled. And lying in that room for 11 weeks, the most real thing I encountered was your voice. Patience's throat tightened. That's not romance, he added. It's not a line. It's a true report. Whatever quality of attention you brought into that room, it reached me. And I don't know what to do with that except tell you. Patience stared at her water glass for a second, then looked up. I almost called in sick that morning, she said. Edmund's brow lifted. The morning I woke up? She nodded. I lay in bed at 5:15 trying to convince myself to stay home. What made you go? He asked. Patience thought about it honestly. I don't know, she said. The alarm went off. I got up. The way you do. Edmund held her gaze. I'm glad the alarm went off, he said. Patience exhaled. Slow, feeling something in her chest soften. Me too, she said. After that, the story does not belong to anybody's fantasy version. It's not a montage. It's not a neat moral. It's two people in the real world, with real differences and real boundaries, figuring out what connection means when it begins in a room where one person couldn't speak. Patience kept working the fourth floor, kept knocking, kept talking. Edmund kept rehabbing, kept showing up, kept learning what it meant to be dependent without losing himself. And here's what matters most. If you strip the story down to its spine, it was never the dramatic moment of waking. It was the small decision before that. Patience in a dark room at 5:15, choosing to show up when she could have stayed home, choosing to treat a silent person like a person, choosing to speak dignity into a room where nobody would have blamed her for doing the bare minimum. She told me once what she wanted people to take from it. She was quiet for a long time, then said, just show up, even when you're tired, especially when you're tired. She paused, then added softer, like she was admitting it to herself too. You don't always get to know which morning is the one that matters. Another pause, but one of them always is.